The expensive crystal glass shattered against the marble floor as Jonathan Pierce's body convulsed violently in his wheelchair. His face turned blue and foam bubbled from his mouth while his fingers clawed desperately at his throat. The liquid nutrition he'd been drinking pooled around the broken glass, mixing with his saliva in a disgusting mess that made the scene even more horrifying. "Help me," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper as his eyes rolled back. His $1 million smart home's medical alert system remained silent because he'd disabled it months ago, tired of false alarms. No one was coming to save him. Amara Johnson had been standing outside his penthouse door for 10 minutes, building up courage to ring the bell. The 26-year-old certified nursing assistant clutched her worn leather portfolio containing her resume and certifications. She'd been unemployed for 3 months after losing her last job when her elderly patient passed away. Her rent was 2 months overdue, her car had been repossessed last week, and she had exactly $12 in her checking account. The sound of something heavy crashing inside made her forget about proper protocol. She tried the door handle and found it unlocked. Without hesitation she burst inside. "Sir, can you hear me?" Amara rushed to Jonathan's side, immediately assessing his condition. His lips were turning purple and his breathing was labored. She'd seen this before during her years working in emergency care. Jonathan tried to push her away with his weak arms, but she ignored his protests. "You're choking and having an allergic reaction. I need to help you right now." She quickly positioned herself behind his wheelchair and performed the modified Heimlich maneuver for wheelchair users. After 3 compressions, a chunk of undissolved protein powder expelled from his throat. His breathing improved slightly, but she could see he was still in distress. "Where's your EpiPen?" she demanded, scanning the room quickly. Jonathan pointed weakly toward a kitchen drawer with trembling fingers. Amara sprinted across the vast living room, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished marble. She found the emergency medication and rushed back, administering the injection into his thigh without asking permission. Within minutes, Jonathan's color began returning to normal, and his breathing steadied. Amara knelt beside his wheelchair, monitoring his pulse and watching for any signs of continued distress. "You saved my life," Jonathan whispered, looking at her with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Who are you?" "Amara Johnson. I'm a certified nursing assistant, and I came here to apply for the caregiver position your assistant posted online." She helped him sit up straighter in his wheelchair. "But right now we need to get you to a hospital to make sure you're completely stable." Will Amara's desperate financial situation force her to take risks that could cost her everything? What secrets is this wealthy man hiding that nearly killed him today? Subscribe and comment below with your thoughts on what you think will happen next. Jonathan shook his head stubbornly. "No hospitals. I hate hospitals. They can't do anything for me anyway." He gestured toward his paralyzed legs with bitter resignation. "Been there, done that." Amara studied his face carefully. Despite his obvious wealth, evident from the penthouse apartment and expensive medical equipment around the room, she saw deep pain in his dark brown eyes that went beyond physical suffering. This was a man who had given up hope. "That liquid nutrition you were drinking," she said, examining the spilled contents on the floor. "How long have you been living on that stuff?" 2 years, Jonathan admitted. "Since the accident. It's easier than dealing with solid food." Amara's professional instincts kicked in as she noticed his pale, thin appearance and the way his expensive clothes hung loose on his frame. "Mr. Pierce, I need to ask you some direct questions about your health and nutrition. Are you willing to answer honestly?" Something in her voice made him nod. Maybe it was the way she'd taken charge during his medical emergency, or maybe it was the genuine concern he saw in her warm brown eyes. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him with such caring attention. "When was the last time you ate actual food? Fruits, vegetables, protein that you had to chew?" Amara asked gently. Jonathan thought for a moment. "I honestly can't remember. Maybe 6 months ago? My doctor said the liquid diet was fine for someone in my condition." "Your condition is paralysis of your lower body, not your digestive system," Amara said firmly but kindly. "Your body is starving for real nutrition. That's probably why you had such a severe reaction today. Your immune system is compromised." She stood up and walked to his kitchen, opening cabinets and the refrigerator. Everything was either processed, packaged, or in liquid form. No fresh produce, no whole grains, no real food anywhere. "Mr. Pierce, I know you don't know me and you have no reason to trust me, but I think I can help you," Amara said, returning to his side. "Not just as a caregiver, but as someone who understands nutrition and healing." Jonathan studied her face. She was beautiful in a natural way that his usual crowd of artificial socialites could never match. Her skin glowed with health, and her athletic build suggested she practiced what she preached about wellness. More importantly, she just saved his life without asking for anything in return. The job pays $3,000 a week plus room and board, Jonathan said suddenly. You'd live here full-time, available for any medical emergencies like today. Are you interested? Amara's eyes widened. $3,000 a week was more than she'd made in the past 4 months combined. It would solve all her financial problems instantly and give her the chance to help someone who clearly needed her skills. Yes, she said without hesitation. When do I start? Right now, Jonathan replied. But I have to warn you, I'm not an easy patient. I don't like change, I don't like being told what to do, and I definitely don't like people trying to fix me. Amara smiled for the first time since entering his apartment. Mr. Pierce, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to help you remember that you're still alive and that your life still has value. Sometimes that's the first step toward healing. As she helped him transfer from his wheelchair to the couch so she could clean up the mess from his medical episode, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that this job was going to be much more complicated than she'd initially thought. The way Jonathan looked at her, the sadness in his eyes, and the obvious neglect of his health all suggested there were deeper issues at play. But she needed this job desperately, and something told her that Jonathan needed her just as much. For the first time in months, Amara felt like she had a purpose again. I'll need to go get my things, she said, already making mental lists of the changes she wanted to implement in his care routine. Take my car, Jonathan said, tossing her the keys to his Mercedes. The black one in the parking garage. Spot number 1. Amara caught the keys, still hardly believing her change in fortune. A few hours ago she'd been worried about how to pay for bus fare. Now she was being trusted with a luxury vehicle and offered more money than she'd ever dreamed of making. As she prepared to leave, Jonathan called out to her. Amara, thank you. For saving me today and for saying yes to this job. I know it won't be easy. Mr. Pierce, she said, pausing at the door, the best things in life are never easy. They're just worth it. The next morning, Amara arrived at Jonathan's penthouse with 2 suitcases and a box of her nursing supplies. She'd spent the night in her old studio apartment, which she could finally afford to keep for another month thanks to her new job. The relief of financial security had given her the best night's sleep she'd had in weeks. Jonathan was already awake when she let herself in with the key he'd given her. He sat in his wheelchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city below. The morning light revealed just how thin and pale he'd become, confirming her suspicions about his poor nutrition. Good morning, Amara said cheerfully, setting down her belongings. How are you feeling after yesterday? Like I got hit by a truck, Jonathan replied without turning around. But alive thanks to you. Amara began unpacking her supplies in the kitchen, organizing medications and nutritional supplements she'd brought from home. I'd like to start by taking your vital signs and getting a complete health history. When was your last physical exam? 6 months ago. Dr. Williams said everything was fine considering my condition. Jonathan finally turned his wheelchair around to face her. Look, Amara, I need to be clear about something. I hired you for emergency medical care, not to overhaul my entire lifestyle. I understand, Amara said, pulling out her blood pressure cuff. But part of emergency care is prevention. If we can improve your overall health, you'll have fewer emergencies to deal with. She approached him with the confidence of someone who'd handled difficult patients before. May I check your blood pressure? Jonathan nodded reluctantly, extending his arm. As she wrapped the cuff around his bicep, he noticed how gentle but efficient her touch was. Most medical professionals treated him with either excessive pity or clinical detachment. Amara treated him like a normal person who happened to need medical care. 140/90, she announced, frowning. That's high. Are you taking any blood pressure medication? No. Dr. Williams said it was probably just stress from the adjustment to my new life. Jonathan's voice carried a bitter edge when he mentioned his condition. Amara made notes in the medical chart she'd created for him. Stress can definitely contribute to high blood pressure, but poor nutrition makes it worse. When did you start the all-liquid diet? Right after I got out of the hospital. Eating solid food seemed pointless when I couldn't feel most of my body anyway. Jonathan watched her write, curious about her thorough approach. You're very different from the other caregivers I've had. How many have you had? Amara asked, moving to check his temperature. 7 in the past 2 years. They never lasted more than a few weeks. Why not? Jonathan was quiet for a moment. I'm not easy to work with. I get frustrated, I push people away, and I don't follow medical advice very well. Amara finished taking his temperature and sat down across from him. Mr. Pierce, can I share something with you? He nodded, intrigued by her serious tone. I've worked with a lot of patients who felt like giving up. People who thought their lives were over because of illness or injury. The ones who recovered weren't necessarily the ones with the best prognosis. They were the ones who found something worth fighting for. And what am I supposed to fight for? Jonathan asked, his voice challenging. I built a business empire, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and then one car accident took away everything that mattered. I can't walk, I can't play sports, I can't even have a normal relationship with a woman. What's left? Amara looked at him steadily. That's not for me to decide. But I can tell you that your body is capable of much more healing than you think. Spinal cord injuries aren't always permanent, especially if you give your nervous system the right nutrition and stimulation. The doctor said I'd never walk again, Jonathan said flatly. Doctors said a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. Medical knowledge changes every day. Amara pulled out her tablet and showed him several research articles she'd bookmarked. Look at these studies on nerve regeneration, spinal cord recovery, and the role of nutrition in neurological healing. Despite himself, Jonathan found himself leaning forward to read the screen. The articles discussed cases of partial and even complete recovery from spinal cord injuries, particularly when patients followed aggressive nutrition and physical therapy protocols. This is all experimental, he said, but his voice lacked the dismissive tone from earlier. So was every medical breakthrough until someone tried it, Amara replied. I'm not promising miracles. I'm just suggesting that we give your body the best possible chance to heal itself. She stood up and walked to his kitchen, opening the refrigerator again. Starting with getting rid of this liquid nutrition and introducing real food. I told you yesterday I don't want to change my diet, Jonathan said, but there was less conviction in his voice. And I told you that I'm here to help you remember you're still alive, Amara replied, pulling out bottles of liquid supplements and placing them on the counter. Living means eating real food, not surviving on processed chemicals. She began making a list on her tablet. I'm going grocery shopping this afternoon. I'll start with simple, easy-to-digest whole foods and gradually introduce more variety as your system adjusts. Jonathan watched her work, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. No one had spoken to him with such confidence about his potential for recovery since the accident. His doctors had focused on managing his condition, not improving it. What if you're wrong? He asked quietly. What if I try all this and nothing changes? Amara paused in her list-making and looked at him directly. Then you'll be exactly where you are now, but with better overall health and more energy. But Mr. Pierce, what if I'm right? What secrets from Jonathan's past could be preventing his recovery? And why does Amara seem so confident about healing methods that his doctors dismissed? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more chapters. The question hung in the air between them. Jonathan realized that somewhere deep inside, beneath all the anger and despair, a tiny spark of hope still existed. Amara's unwavering confidence was starting to chip away at the walls he'd built around his heart. Okay, he said finally. We can try your approach. But I have conditions. Name them, Amara said, sitting back down. First, if this doesn't work, you don't lecture me about giving up. Second, you don't treat me like an invalid. I may be paralyzed, but I'm still the CEO of a major corporation. Third, you don't pity me. Deal? Amara said without hesitation. But I have conditions too. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Such as? You follow my nutritional recommendations completely for at least 6 weeks before judging the results. You let me implement a physical therapy routine. And you stop calling yourself broken or useless in my presence. I never said I was useless, Jonathan protested. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face and in the way you've been treating your body. Amara's voice was gentle but firm. Healing starts with believing you deserve to heal. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her words. When was the last time someone had challenged him like this? Most people either wanted something from him or treated him with kid gloves because of his condition. You're tougher than you look, he said finally, a hint of admiration in his voice. I have to be. The people I care about depend on it. Amara began gathering her supplies to set up her workspace in the guest room he'd assigned to her. I'll let you get back to your morning routine while I get settled. Then we'll start with a simple breakfast of real food. As she headed toward her room, Jonathan called out to her again. Amara, can I ask you something? She turned back to face him. Why are you so sure this will work? Have you seen recoveries like what you're suggesting? Amara smiled, and for a moment, something sad flickered across her features. Let's just say I have personal experience with the healing power of proper nutrition and refusing to give up hope. She disappeared into her room, leaving Jonathan with more questions than answers. There was clearly more to his new caregiver than met the eye. But for the first time in 2 years, he found himself genuinely curious about another person and cautiously optimistic about his future. The morning sun streamed through his windows, and Jonathan realized he was looking forward to breakfast for the first time since his accident. Maybe Amara was right. Maybe it was time to start living again instead of just surviving. 3 days into Amara's employment, the kitchen had transformed from a sterile medical station into something resembling an actual place where food was prepared. Fresh vegetables filled the refrigerator, whole grain bread sat on the counter, and the smell of real cooking had replaced the antiseptic scent of liquid supplements. Jonathan sat at his dining table, staring suspiciously at the plate Amara had set before him. Scrambled eggs with spinach, whole grain toast with avocado, and fresh strawberries looked nothing like the beige liquid he'd grown accustomed to consuming. "This looks like actual food," he said as if that were a complaint. "That's because it is actual food," Amara replied, sitting down across from him with her own plate. "Your body needs protein to rebuild muscle, healthy fats for nerve function, and antioxidants to reduce inflammation." Jonathan picked up his fork reluctantly. "What if I can't keep it down? I haven't eaten solid food in so long." "Then we'll start with smaller portions and build up gradually. But your body is designed to digest real food, Mr. Pierce. It's been starving for proper nutrition." Amara took a bite of her eggs, watching him carefully. "Try just one bite." He cut a small piece of the scrambled eggs and chewed slowly. The texture felt strange after years of liquid nutrition, but the taste was incredible. He'd forgotten how much he used to enjoy food before the accident changed everything about his life. "It's good," he admitted, sounding surprised. "Of course it's good. Food is one of life's great pleasures. There's no reason you should have to give that up because of your injury." Amara smiled encouragingly as he took another bite. "How does your stomach feel?" "Fine actually. Better than fine." Jonathan found himself eating with more enthusiasm than he'd felt about anything in months. I'd forgotten what real food tastes like. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Jonathan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. It's my business partner, Richard." He answered the phone with a terse, "What is it, Richard?" Amara couldn't help but notice the immediate change in Jonathan's demeanor. His shoulders tensed, and the relaxed expression he'd been wearing while eating disappeared completely. "No, I told you I'm not ready to sell my shares," Jonathan said firmly. "The company isn't going anywhere and neither am I. I don't care what the board thinks about my condition. I'm still mentally capable of making business decisions." Amara pretended to focus on her breakfast while listening to the one-sided conversation. It was clear that Jonathan was under pressure from his business partner about something significant. "Richard, we've been through this. I built that company from nothing and I'm not signing it over to you just because I'm in a wheelchair. Fine, we'll discuss it next week, but my answer won't change." He ended the call and sat back in his wheelchair, his appetite apparently gone despite barely touching his food. "Problems at work?" Amara asked gently. "Richard thinks I should sell him my controlling interest in the company because I'm not capable of active leadership anymore." Jonathan's voice was bitter. "He's been pushing this ever since the accident." "What kind of company is it?" "Construction and real estate development. Pierce Industries. We build commercial properties, shopping centers, office buildings." Jonathan pushed his plate away, his mood clearly spoiled. "Richard thinks clients won't take meetings with someone in a wheelchair." Amara studied his face carefully. "What do you think?" "I think he's probably right. Who wants to do business with half a man?" Jonathan's self-deprecating comment came out reflexively, as if he'd said it many times before. "Half a man." Amara's voice sharpened. "Mr. Pierce, your brain wasn't injured in that accident. Your intelligence, your business experience, your knowledge of the industry, none of that changed. You're the same person who built a successful company, just with different physical capabilities. It's not that simple, Amara. Business is about perception, confidence, power dynamics. When clients see me roll into a conference room, they see weakness." Amara leaned forward, her eyes flashing with something that looked like anger. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who survived a traumatic accident and kept his company profitable while dealing with a major disability. That takes more strength than most people will ever need to show." Jonathan was taken aback by the intensity of her response. "You don't understand the business world. You're right, I don't. But I understand people, and I understand that you're letting fear make your decisions for you. Amara stood up and began clearing the table. You're so worried about how others perceive your wheelchair that you're giving up everything you worked for. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jonathan felt a surge of anger at her bluntness, but underneath it was something else. When was the last time someone had spoken to him so directly, without tiptoeing around his condition? Excuse me? His voice was dangerously quiet. You heard me. Amara continued cleaning up, seemingly unaffected by his reaction. You've decided that your life is over because you can't walk. You've given up on your health, your company, and probably any chance at personal happiness. That's not realistic, Mr. Pierce. That's cowardly. You have no idea what you're talking about, Jonathan said, his voice rising. You don't know what it's like to lose everything that defined you as a person. Amara paused in her cleaning and looked at him directly. You're right. I don't know what it's like to be paralyzed. But I do know what it's like to face a choice between fighting for your life or giving up. And I know that the people who choose to fight even when the odds seem impossible, are the ones who get their lives back. Something in her tone made Jonathan look at her more carefully. There was pain in her eyes, old and deep, that spoke of personal experience with impossible choices. What happened to you? He asked quietly. Amara was silent for a moment, clearly debating how much to share. My younger brother was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 12. The doctors said he had maybe 6 months to live. Everyone told us to prepare for the worst, to accept the inevitable. She sat back down at the table, her hands folded in front of her. But my brother refused to accept that diagnosis. He fought through every treatment, every setback, every moment when it would have been easier to give up. And you know what? He's alive today, 28 years old, married with 2 kids. He became a pediatric oncologist so he could help other children fight the same battle he won. Jonathan felt something shift inside his chest as he listened to her story. How long did his treatment take? 3 years. 3 years of hell, honestly. But he never stopped believing he could beat it, and neither did our family. That's when I decided to go into healthcare. I wanted to help people find the strength to fight for their lives the way he did. And you think I should fight to keep my company the same way your brother fought cancer? I think you should fight to keep your life, period. Your company, your health, your relationships, all of it. Amara looked at him steadily. But you have to decide what's worth fighting for. No one else can make that choice for you. Jonathan sat quietly for several minutes, absorbing her words. The anger he'd felt earlier had transformed into something else, something that felt almost like inspiration. The next board meeting is on Monday, he said finally. Richard wants me to sign papers transferring my shares to him. What do you want to do? I want to show up to that meeting and remind everyone why they made me CEO in the first place. Jonathan's voice was stronger now, more determined. But I need to be at my best, physically and mentally. Amara smiled. Then we'd better get you back to eating that breakfast. Your brain needs proper fuel if you're going to outmaneuver your business partner. Jonathan picked up his fork and took another bite of the eggs, which had grown cold during their conversation. Even cold, they tasted better than anything he'd consumed in 2 years. Amara, he said between bites, thank you. Not just for the food but for challenging me. That's what I'm here for, Mr. Pierce. To help you remember what you're capable of. As Jonathan finished his breakfast, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before his accident. Excitement about the future. Monday's board meeting suddenly seemed like an opportunity rather than a threat, and for the first time he was looking forward to proving Richard wrong. Amara watched him eat with satisfaction. Getting him to consume real food was just the first step. Now she needed to help him rebuild his confidence and strength for the battles ahead. And something told her that Jonathan Pierce was going to need every advantage he could get. Over the weekend, Amara had transformed Jonathan's rarely used home gym into a proper physical therapy space. She'd researched specialized equipment for spinal cord injury patients and had it delivered and set up while Jonathan was sleeping. When he wheeled into the room Monday morning before his board meeting, he stopped short in surprise. What is all this? He asked, staring at the parallel bars, standing frame and electrical stimulation equipment that now occupied the space alongside his dusty treadmill and weight machines. Your new physical therapy setup, Amara said, adjusting the height of the parallel bars. If you're going to fight for your company, you need to fight for your body too. They go hand in hand. Jonathan approached the standing frame with curiosity and apprehension. I haven't stood upright in 2 years. Then it's time, Amara said simply. The electrical stimulation will help activate your muscles while you're supported in the frame. It's designed to maintain muscle mass and stimulate nerve pathways. My doctors never mentioned anything like this. Amara paused in her setup, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes doctors focus more on helping patients adapt to their limitations than on pushing the boundaries of what might be possible. There's nothing wrong with that approach, but it's not the only option. She helped him transfer from his wheelchair to the standing frame, securing the safety straps around his waist and thighs. As the frame slowly lifted him to a standing position, Jonathan felt a rush of emotions he hadn't expected. "I'd forgotten how tall I am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How different everything looks from this height." 6'2", Amara confirmed, attaching the electrical stimulation electrodes to his legs. "Now, I want you to focus on trying to feel these muscles as the stimulation activates them. Don't force anything, just pay attention." The gentle electrical pulses began working his leg muscles, and Jonathan concentrated on any sensation he might detect. For the first few minutes there was nothing. Then, so faintly he almost thought he was imagining it, he felt something in his right thigh. "Did you feel that?" Amara asked, watching his face carefully. "I think, maybe. It's so slight I'm not sure." "That's more than you felt last week," she said encouragingly. "Sensation often returns before movement. We're going to do this every day, gradually increasing the intensity and duration." As Jonathan stood supported in the frame, Amara moved around the room, organizing his medical files and making notes about his therapy plan. He found himself studying her with growing appreciation. In just 1 week, she'd accomplished more than his entire medical team had in 2 years. "Amara, can I ask you something personal?" he said. "Sure. Why aren't you working in a hospital or rehabilitation center? Your skills are obviously beyond what most private caregivers offer." Amara was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on the papers she was organizing. "I was working in a rehabilitation hospital until 3 months ago." "What happened?" "I had a disagreement with the administration about patient care protocols. They preferred the conservative approach, managing conditions rather than aggressively pursuing recovery." She looked up at him. "I believed patients deserved better options than just learning to live with their limitations." "So you quit?" "I was fired, actually. For insubordination." Amara's laugh was rueful. "Apparently, challenging established medical protocols and advocating too strongly for patients makes you a troublemaker." Jonathan felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "Their loss is my gain then." "I hope so. You're taking a risk hiring someone with my reputation." She checked the settings on his stimulation unit. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness or fatigue?" "Actually, I feel more energetic than I have in months." "Is that normal?" "Absolutely. Proper nutrition and physical stimulation increase circulation and oxygen flow. Your body is starting to remember what it feels like to be alive." Amara made a note in his chart. "Are you nervous about the board meeting?" Jonathan considered the question. "Less nervous than I expected. I feel clearer, more focused." "Is that the food?" "Partly. But I think it's also because you've decided to stop being a victim and start being a fighter again." Amara began lowering the standing frame. "That mental shift is just as important as the physical improvements." As Jonathan settled back into his wheelchair, he realized she was right. For the first time since his accident, he felt like himself again. Not the broken version of himself he'd become, but the determined, successful man who'd built an empire from nothing. "I want to show you something," he said suddenly, wheeling over to his desk. He pulled out a thick file folder and handed it to Amara. "These are all the reports from my accident investigation." Amara opened the folder and scanned the police reports, insurance documents, and witness statements. "You've kept all this?" "Something about it never sat right with me. The police said I fell asleep at the wheel and ran off the road, but I wasn't tired that night. I don't drink, I wasn't on any medications that would cause drowsiness." Jonathan's voice grew more intense as he spoke. "I remember driving home from a late meeting with Richard. We'd been discussing a major expansion project. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital 3 days later." Amara read through the witness statements carefully. "This report says there were no other vehicles involved, no evidence of mechanical failure. But look at this." She pointed to a photograph of his car. "The damage pattern doesn't look consistent with a single vehicle accident." "That's what I thought too. But the police closed the case, the insurance company paid out, and everyone told me to focus on my recovery instead of dwelling on the past." "What kind of expansion project were you discussing with Richard that night?" Jonathan hesitated for a moment. "A major commercial development downtown. It would have doubled our company's value overnight. But it required a significant investment, and we disagreed on the financing approach. What kind of disagreement? Richard wanted to bring in outside investors who would basically take over the company. I wanted to fund it ourselves, maintain control. Jonathan's expression darkened. The night of my accident, I told him absolutely not. We were going to do it my way or not at all. Amara felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the accident photos again. Mr. Pierce, have you ever considered that your accident might not have been an accident? You mean someone deliberately caused it? Jonathan's voice was skeptical. That sounds like a conspiracy theory. Maybe. But you said yourself that something didn't feel right. And if Richard stood to gain control of the company through your incapacitation? Amara let the implication hang in the air. Jonathan was quiet for several minutes, processing the possibility she'd raised. Even if that were true, what could I do about it now? There's no proof and the case is closed. There might be proof if we knew where to look for it. Modern cars have computer systems that record data before crashes. Cell phone records, security cameras, financial records showing who might have benefited from your accident. Amara closed the file folder. The question is, do you want to know the truth? Yes, Jonathan said without hesitation. But first, I need to get through today's board meeting. I need to show Richard and everyone else that I'm still capable of running my own company. Amara nodded approvingly. One battle at a time. But Mr. Pierce, if we're going to investigate this properly, you need to be careful. If someone was willing to hurt you once to get control of your company, they might try again if they think you're getting too close to the truth. Are you suggesting I'm in danger? I'm suggesting we both need to be cautious. But I'm not backing down, and I hope you won't either. Amara helped him transfer back to his regular wheelchair. Now let's get you ready for that board meeting. You're going to remind everyone why you're the CEO. As Jonathan prepared for the most important meeting of his post-accident life, he couldn't shake the feeling that Amara had opened a door he'd been afraid to walk through. The possibility that his accident wasn't random changed everything. If Richard had orchestrated his injury to steal the company, then every day of pain and despair Jonathan had endured was built on a lie. But first he had a company to save. The investigation could wait until after he'd proven that Jonathan Pierce wasn't going anywhere. The board meeting had been a complete success. Jonathan arrived in his best suit, looking healthier and more alert than he had in 2 years, thanks to Amara's nutritional program. He'd presented a comprehensive plan for the downtown development project that impressed even his critics on the board. Richard's proposal to buy out Jonathan's shares was voted down unanimously. You were incredible in there, Amara said as they drove home from the office building. The way you commanded that room, no one was thinking about your wheelchair. They were thinking about your vision for the company. Jonathan felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced since before his accident. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be respected for my mind instead of pitted for my condition. Richard didn't look too happy when the board rejected his proposal. No, he didn't. In fact, he seemed almost panicked when I announced we were moving forward with the original development plan. Jonathan glanced at Amara as she drove. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday about the accident not being random. Have you decided whether you want to pursue it? Yes, but I'll need help. I can't exactly conduct a covert investigation from a wheelchair without attracting attention. Amara smiled. Good thing you hired someone who's naturally curious and has time to do research. That evening, they spread the accident files across Jonathan's dining room table and began a systematic review of every document. Amara had brought her laptop and was cross-referencing the official reports with news articles and public records from the time of the accident. Look at this, she said, pointing to a financial document. 3 days after your accident, Richard took out a substantial loan against his shares in the company. Why would he need cash so quickly? Jonathan studied the bank statement she'd found in his files. I don't know. Our company was profitable. He shouldn't have needed outside financing for anything. Unless he owed money to someone and needed to pay them back quickly. Amara made a note on her legal pad. What about this witness statement? Mrs. Chen said she saw your car swerve suddenly as if avoiding something, but there's no record of what that something might have been. The police said she was probably confused because of the darkness and distance. Or she saw exactly what happened but no one believed her. Amara pulled up a map on her laptop. Where does Mrs. Chen live in relation to the accident site? Jonathan leaned over to look at the screen, catching a hint of her perfume in the process. He'd been trying to ignore his growing attraction to Amara, telling himself it was just gratitude for her care. But moments like this, when she was completely focused and determined, made it impossible to deny his feelings. Her apartment building is here, he said, pointing to the map. She would have had a clear view of that stretch of road from her window. We should talk to her. Amara, it's been 2 years. Even if she saw something, why would she remember details now? Because traumatic events stick in people's memories. And because if someone deliberately caused your accident, she might have been afraid to speak up at the time. Amara looked at him seriously. Are you ready for what we might find? If Richard was involved, it means someone you trusted tried to destroy your life. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, absorbing the weight of that possibility. I need to know the truth, whatever it is. They spent the next hour mapping out a plan to investigate the accident systematically. Amara would interview Mrs. Chen while Jonathan was at work, avoiding suspicion. She would also research Richard's financial situation around the time of the accident and look into the backgrounds of everyone who stood to benefit from Jonathan's incapacitation. There's something else we should consider, Amara said as they finished organizing their research. If Richard was desperate enough to arrange an accident, he might be desperate enough to try something else if he thinks we're getting close to the truth. You mean we could be in danger? I mean we should be careful. No confronting him directly until we have solid evidence. No letting him know we suspect anything. Amara closed her laptop. And maybe we should consider that your recent improvement might make him nervous all by itself. Jonathan felt a chill at the implication. Because if I'm getting stronger, I'm less likely to sell him the company. Exactly. Which means our investigation isn't just about justice for the past. It might be about preventing something from happening in the future. As they cleaned up their research materials, Jonathan found himself studying Amara's face in the lamplight. She'd come into his life as a caregiver, but somewhere along the way she'd become so much more. She believed in his recovery when no one else did, challenged him when he needed pushing, and now she was willing to help him seek the truth about the worst night of his life. Amara, he said as she gathered her papers, why are you doing all this? The investigation, I mean. It's not part of your job description. She paused in her organizing and looked at him directly. Because you deserve the truth. Because no one should have their life stolen from them and just accept it. And because. She hesitated as if deciding whether to say something more. Because what? Because I care about what happens to you. More than I probably should, professionally speaking. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and complication. Jonathan felt his heart rate increase as he processed her words. Amara, I need you to know that I care about you too. More than I should, given our working relationship. She smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. Jonathan, we should probably focus on the investigation right now. Sorting out our personal feelings can wait until after we figure out what really happened to you. He nodded, understanding her caution but feeling disappointed nonetheless. You're right. First the truth, then everything else. First the truth, she agreed. But I want you to know that there will be an everything else to talk about when this is over. As Amara headed to her room for the night, Jonathan sat alone at his dining table, feeling more hopeful about the future than he had in years. Not just because of the potential answers they might find about his accident, but because of the possibility that when the investigation was over, he and Amara might explore the connection that was clearly growing between them. For the first time since his accident, Jonathan was looking forward to tomorrow. And the day after that. And all the days that might come after they uncovered the truth about what had really happened that night 2 years ago. Mrs. Chen was a tiny, elderly woman who answered her apartment door with obvious suspicion until Amara explained who she was and why she was there. Within minutes, she was bustling around her small kitchen, preparing tea and speaking in rapid, accented English about the night she witnessed Jonathan's accident. I tell police everything but they no listen. Say I confused, say I too far away to see clearly. Mrs. Chen shook her head as she poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. But I have perfect vision. I see everything that night. Amara sat forward eagerly. What exactly did you see, Mrs. Chen? Mr. Pierce's car, the blue BMW, driving normal speed on the road. Then another car, dark color, maybe black or dark blue, come up fast behind him. Mrs. Chen gestured with her hands to demonstrate. Other car bump his car from behind, not hard, but enough to make him swerve. The other car hit him deliberately? Yes. Hit him, then when he tried to control his car, the other car speed up and hit him again, harder this time, on the side. That when Mr. Pierce's car go off the road and hit the tree. Mrs. Chen's voice grew emotional as she relived the memory. I call 911 right away, but other car already gone. Amara felt her pulse quicken as Mrs. Chen confirmed her suspicions. Did you tell the police about the second car? Of course I tell them. But they say no evidence of second car at scene, no paint transfer, no witnesses except confused old lady. Mrs. Chen's expression grew bitter. They make me feel like I'm imagining things. You weren't imagining anything, Mrs. Chen. Did you see the license plate or get a good look at the driver? Too dark to see plate number clearly, but I think it start with letter R. Driver wearing dark clothes, maybe hat or hood. Could be man or woman, I'm not sure. Amara made detailed notes as Mrs. Chen spoke. Is there anything else you remember about that night? Anything that seemed unusual? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking carefully. After accident, I stay at window watching for ambulance. While I waiting, I see same dark car drive by slowly, like driver checking to see what happened. That when I know for sure was not accident. How long after the crash did you see the car come back? Maybe 10-15 minutes? Before police arrive, but after ambulance take Mr. Pierce away. As Amara drove back to Jonathan's penthouse, her mind raced with the implications of what Mrs. Chen had told her. Someone had definitely caused Jonathan's accident deliberately, and they'd returned to the scene to observe the aftermath. The calculated nature of it made her stomach turn with anger and fear. Jonathan was waiting anxiously when she arrived home, having left work early to hear what she'd discovered. Mrs. Chen was telling the truth, Amara said without preamble. Someone deliberately ran you off the road, then came back to watch the results. Jonathan's face went pale as she related everything Mrs. Chen had told her. When she finished, he sat in stunned silence for several minutes. A car with a license plate starting with R, he said finally. Richard drives a dark blue Mercedes. His vanity plate is Rich One. That's not proof by itself, but it's certainly suspicious. Amara sat down across from him. Jonathan, I think we need to be very careful how we proceed from here. If Richard was willing to try to kill you once, he won't hesitate to do it again if he thinks you're onto him. You think he'd actually try to hurt me again? I think someone who's desperate enough to arrange a car accident to steal a company is capable of anything. Amara pulled out her phone. I've been researching Richard's financial situation around the time of your accident. Look at this. She showed him bank records she'd obtained through online searches and public filings. 3 months before your accident, Richard took out several large personal loans. A week after your accident, he paid them all off in full. Where did he get the money to pay off loans that quickly after I was incapacitated? That's what we need to find out. But Jonathan, I found something else that's even more disturbing. Amara pulled up another document on her phone. Richard increased his life insurance policy on you significantly just 2 months before the accident. Jonathan stared at the insurance document in disbelief. He took out a life insurance policy on me? As your business partner, it's not unusual for him to have coverage on you. But increasing it by $5 million right before your accident seems like more than a coincidence. The full scope of Richard's plan was becoming clear, and it was more sinister than either of them had imagined. He hadn't just wanted to incapacitate Jonathan to take over the company. He'd been prepared for Jonathan to die in the accident. He wanted me dead, Jonathan said quietly. Not just injured but dead. It looks that way. Which means that your recovery, your return to active leadership of the company, represents a serious threat to him. Amara reached across the table and took his hand. Jonathan, I think you should consider going to the police with what we've found. With what proof? Bank records that show suspicious timing but no direct evidence? An elderly witness the police already dismissed? Insurance policies that could be explained as normal business planning? Jonathan shook his head. Richard is smart. He wouldn't have left obvious evidence. Then what do we do? Jonathan was quiet for a moment, thinking through their options. We need more evidence. Something that definitively connects Richard to the accident or proves he paid someone to cause it. How do we get that kind of evidence? I'm not sure yet. But I know someone who might be able to help us. Jonathan reached for his phone. Detective Sarah Martinez worked the case originally. She was one of the few people who seemed to take Mrs. Chen's statement seriously, even though she couldn't act on it without more evidence. As Jonathan dialed the detective's number, Amara felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. They were getting closer to the truth, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were also putting themselves in more danger with each discovery. What will Detective Martinez reveal about the case that was never officially solved? And how far will Richard go to protect his secrets when he realizes Jonathan is stronger than ever? Let us know what you think will happen next in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. That evening, as they waited for Detective Martinez to return Jonathan's call, Amara noticed Jonathan seemed more tense and preoccupied than usual. During dinner, he kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting to see someone watching them. Are you okay? she asked, serving him another portion of the salmon and vegetables she'd prepared. I keep thinking about what you said about Richard being willing to try again if he thinks I'm getting too close to the truth. Jonathan pushed his food around his plate absently. Maybe we should back off the investigation. I don't want to put you in danger. Jonathan Pierce, are you seriously suggesting we give up now? When we're this close to proving what really happened to you? I'm suggesting that your safety is more important to me than getting revenge for something that happened 2 years ago. Amara felt her heart skip at the concern in his voice, but she also felt frustrated by his protective instincts. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And it's about making sure Richard can never hurt you or anyone else again. Before Jonathan could respond, his phone rang. Detective Martinez was returning his call. Mr. Pierce, I have to admit I'm surprised to hear from you after all this time, the detective said when Jonathan put her on speakerphone. What can I do for you? Detective Martinez, I wanted to ask you about my accident case. Were there any leads or evidence that didn't make it into the official reports? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Pierce, why are you asking about this now? The case was closed 2 years ago. Because I have reason to believe the accident wasn't accidental, and I think you suspected that too. Another pause, longer this time. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? There are some things we should discuss in person. After hanging up, Jonathan and Amara looked at each other with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She knows something, Amara said. Something she couldn't put in the official reports. Tomorrow we might finally get the answers we've been looking for, Jonathan agreed. But tonight, I want you to promise me something. What? Promise me that if this gets too dangerous you'll walk away. I can't bear the thought of you getting hurt because of my problems. Amara stood up and walked around the table to where he sat. Without hesitation, she leaned down and kissed him gently on the forehead. Jonathan, I'm not walking away from you. Not now, not ever. We're going to see this through together and then we're going to build a life together. That's a promise. As she headed to her room, Jonathan sat alone at the dinner table, feeling overwhelmed by the depth of his feelings for her. In just 2 weeks, Amara had not only saved his life and restored his health, but she'd also given him something he thought he'd lost forever: hope for a future filled with love and purpose. Tomorrow they would meet with Detective Martinez and possibly get the evidence they needed to expose Richard's crimes. But tonight, Jonathan allowed himself to imagine what life might be like when the investigation was over and he and Amara could focus on the love that was clearly growing between them. Detective Martinez met them at a small diner away from the police station, explaining that what she had to share wasn't officially part of the case file. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much injustice go unpunished. I never believed your accident was random, she said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from Jonathan and Amara. But I couldn't prove it, and my supervisor was eager to close the case as a single-vehicle accident. What made you suspicious? Jonathan asked. Several things. Mrs. Chen's testimony was very detailed and consistent, not the confused ramblings of someone who didn't see clearly. The damage pattern on your car suggested multiple impacts, not just hitting the tree. And your business partner's behavior during the investigation was unusual. Amara leaned forward. Unusual how? He was very eager to provide an explanation for why you might have fallen asleep at the wheel. Kept suggesting you'd been stressed, working long hours, maybe taking sleeping medication. Detective Martinez pulled out a small notebook. Most people in his position would have been asking questions, wanting to know what happened. Richard seemed more interested in providing answers. Did you investigate him at all? Informally, yes. I looked into his finances, his whereabouts that night, his relationship with you. What I found was interesting but not prosecutable. Detective Martinez opened her notebook and showed them copies of documents she'd gathered. Richard had significant gambling debts that were coming due around the time of your accident. He owed money to some very dangerous people, the kind who don't accept payment plans. Jonathan stared at the financial records. I had no idea he was gambling. High-stakes poker games, apparently. He was in deep enough that his life was potentially in danger if he didn't pay up quickly. The detective continued. The night of your accident, Richard claimed he was home alone after your business meeting. No alibi, no witnesses to his whereabouts. But you couldn't prove he was involved in causing the accident? No physical evidence, no witnesses who could identify him as the driver of the second vehicle. Even Mrs. Chen couldn't positively identify him. Detective Martinez closed her notebook. But Mr. Pierce, I want you to know that I've kept this case file active in my personal records. If new evidence ever surfaced, I'd be ready to reopen the investigation. Amara pulled out her phone and showed the detective the insurance and financial documents she'd gathered. Would this constitute new evidence? Detective Martinez studied the information carefully, her expression growing more interested with each document. This is very compelling. The timing of the insurance increase, the loan payoffs immediately after the accident, the pattern of financial desperation followed by sudden solvency. Is it enough to bring charges? It's enough to get a warrant to search his financial records more thoroughly. If we can find evidence that he paid someone to cause the accident, or if we can trace the money he used to pay off his debts. The detective trailed off, then looked directly at Jonathan. Are you prepared for what reopening this case might involve? It won't be quiet or private. Richard will know you're investigating him. Jonathan looked at Amara, who nodded encouragingly. Detective Martinez, I want justice. Whatever the cost. Then give me a few days to present this information to my supervisor and see if we can get official approval to reopen the case. Detective Martinez stood to leave. In the meantime, be very careful. If Richard realizes you're on to him, he might decide to finish what he started 2 years ago. As they drove home, Jonathan felt a mixture of vindication and apprehension. After 2 years of wondering if he was imagining things, he finally had confirmation that his suspicions were justified. How do you feel? Amara asked, glancing at him as she drove. Angry, relieved, scared, hopeful. Jonathan watched the city pass by outside the window. Mostly, I feel ready to get my life back completely. Speaking of getting your life back, we need to talk about your physical therapy progress. Amara's voice took on her professional tone. You've been showing remarkable improvement over the past 2 weeks. I've noticed. Yesterday in the standing frame, I definitely felt sensation in both legs. And this morning when I was transferring from my wheelchair to the shower chair, I swear I felt my right leg try to support some weight. Amara smiled. I've been documenting everything. The combination of proper nutrition, electrical stimulation, and your renewed sense of purpose is having exactly the effect I hoped for. They spent the rest of the drive discussing his therapy regimen and the improvements he'd been experiencing. By the time they reached his penthouse, Jonathan was feeling optimistic about multiple aspects of his future. That evening, during his physical therapy session, something remarkable happened. As Amara was helping him with exercises in the parallel bars, Jonathan felt a definite twitch in his right leg muscles. Did you see that? He asked excitedly. I saw it, Amara confirmed, barely able to contain her own excitement. Try to do it again. Focus on moving your right leg forward. Jonathan concentrated intensely, and after a few moments, his right leg moved forward slightly under its own power. It wasn't much, barely noticeable to anyone not watching carefully, but it was voluntary movement. Oh my God, he whispered. I moved it. I actually moved my leg. Amara was crying with happiness as she helped him document the movement on video. Jonathan, this is incredible. Your spinal cord is healing. The nerve pathways are regenerating. Does this mean I might walk again? I can't make promises about how much function you'll regain, but this proves that recovery is possible. Your body is responding to everything we've been doing. Amara wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself professionally. We need to increase your therapy intensity and frequency. If you're willing to work harder, we might see even more improvement. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Jonathan said immediately. Amara, you've given me my life back. You've given me hope, health, the truth about my accident, and now the possibility of walking again. You've given me something too, she said softly. What? A reason to believe in love again. A future I never thought I'd have. Amara moved closer to him, her eyes reflecting the depth of her feelings. Jonathan, I know we said we'd wait until after the investigation to talk about our personal relationship, but I can't wait any longer. Neither can I, he admitted. Amara, I'm in love with you. Completely, hopelessly in love with you. I love you too, she said, leaning down to kiss him properly for the first time. As they held each other in the middle of his makeshift therapy room, surrounded by equipment that symbolized hope and recovery, Jonathan felt like his life was finally beginning again. Not just returning to what it had been before the accident, but becoming something better than he'd ever imagined possible. Marry me, he said suddenly, the words coming out before he'd consciously decided to say them. Amara pulled back to look at him in surprise. Jonathan, are you sure? We've only known each other for 2 weeks. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, whether I'm in this wheelchair or walking down the aisle. He took her hands in his. I love you, Amara. Will you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible. As they kissed again, both of them crying with happiness, Jonathan realized that his accident hadn't destroyed his life after all. It had led him to Amara, to true love, and to a future that was brighter than anything he'd had before. The investigation with Detective Martinez would continue, and his physical recovery would require months more of hard work. But tonight, surrounded by the woman he loved and filled with hope for the future, Jonathan Pierce was the happiest man alive. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to Jonathan's penthouse. Amara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when the doorman called to announce that Richard was on his way up, accompanied by two other men Jonathan didn't recognize. That's strange, Jonathan said, wheeling toward the door. Richard never comes here unannounced, and he certainly doesn't bring guests. Amara felt a chill of apprehension. Jonathan, what if he knows we've been investigating him? What if Detective Martinez's inquiries somehow got back to him? Before Jonathan could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. He opened it to find Richard flanked by two large men in expensive suits who looked more like bodyguards than business associates. Richard, this is unexpected, Jonathan said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Who are your friends? Business associates, Richard replied curtly, pushing past Jonathan into the apartment. We need to talk. The two men followed Richard inside, their eyes scanning the room with professional alertness. Amara noticed one of them paying particular attention to the exits and windows. Amara, isn't it? Richard said, his tone falsely pleasant. Jonathan's new nurse. I hear you've been quite helpful with his recovery. I'm his physical therapist and caregiver, yes, Amara replied carefully, moving closer to Jonathan's wheelchair. Excellent. Perhaps you could give us some privacy for a business discussion. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure you have other duties to attend to. Actually, Amara stays, Jonathan said firmly. She's involved in all aspects of my care and recovery. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of her. Richard's expression hardened slightly. Very well. Jonathan, I'm here because I've heard some disturbing rumors. Rumors that you've been asking questions about your accident, making wild accusations about what happened that night. Jonathan felt his heart rate increase but kept his voice steady. I have no idea what you're talking about, Richard. Don't lie to me, Richard snapped, his facade of civility dropping completely. I know you've been talking to Detective Martinez. I know you've been digging into financial records and interviewing witnesses. One of Richard's companions stepped forward slightly, and Amara noticed the bulge of what looked like a weapon beneath his jacket. Her nursing training had taught her to remain calm in crisis situations, but she'd never faced anything like this. Richard, even if I have been asking questions, that's my right, Jonathan said. If there's something you want to tell me about what happened that night, now would be a good time. Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. What happened that night is that you had an accident. A tragic, random accident that left you paralyzed and unable to run our company effectively. Everything that's happened since then has been the natural consequence of your incapacity. Including you trying to force me to sell my shares? Including me trying to save a company that you're no longer capable of leading. Richard began pacing around the room, his agitation increasing. Do you have any idea how much money we've lost because of your condition? How many deals have fallen through because clients don't want to work with a cripple? Amara stepped forward angrily. Don't you dare use that word about him. Ah, the devoted nurse defending her patient, Richard said mockingly. Tell me, Amara, has Jonathan told you about his little obsession with proving his accident was intentional? Has he shared his paranoid theories about being deliberately targeted? What I've shared with Amara is my business, Jonathan interjected. Richard, what do you want? Why are you really here? Richard stopped pacing and faced Jonathan directly. I'm here to make you an offer. A very generous offer for your shares in the company. More generous than what I proposed to the board last week. I'm not interested in selling. I think you should reconsider. Especially given your recent improvements. Richard's eyes moved to the physical therapy equipment visible through the open door of the gym. I understand you've been making remarkable progress with your recovery. Standing, even showing signs of muscle movement in your legs. Jonathan and Amara exchanged a look of alarm. How did Richard know about the details of his physical therapy? You've been watching us, Amara accused. I've been keeping an eye on my business partner's condition, yes. It's my responsibility to the company to understand Jonathan's capabilities. Richard's tone was matter-of-fact. And what I've observed is that Jonathan is making a recovery that his doctors said was impossible. That's good news, isn't it? Jonathan asked, though he already suspected where this conversation was heading. It would be if it didn't complicate things so significantly. Richard pulled out a contract from his briefcase. This is an offer to purchase your shares for $50 million. More than fair market value. I told you I'm not selling. You haven't heard the alternative yet. Richard nodded to his two companions who moved closer to Jonathan and Amara. The alternative is that you have another accident. One that finishes what the first one started. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Amara felt her breath catch as the full implications of Richard's words became clear. You're admitting you caused the first accident, Jonathan said quietly. I'm saying that accidents happen to people who don't know when to step aside gracefully. Richard placed the contract on the coffee table. Sign this, Jonathan. Transfer your shares to me, disappear quietly with your nurse, and live happily ever after somewhere far from here. And if I don't? Then your miraculous recovery will be cut tragically short. Along with anyone who might try to help you or testify about what they've seen. Richard's eyes moved meaningfully to Amara. Jonathan felt a surge of protective fury. Threatening him was one thing, but threatening Amara was unforgivable. You have 24 hours to decide, Richard continued, heading toward the door with his companions. Sign the papers and disappear, or face the consequences of your stubbornness. After they left, Jonathan and Amara sat in stunned silence for several minutes. He basically confessed to causing your accident, Amara said finally. And he just threatened to kill both of us. We need to call Detective Martinez immediately, Jonathan said, reaching for his phone. Richard just made a serious mistake by coming here and making direct threats. Jonathan, he had people watching us. He knows about your physical therapy progress. He knows we've been investigating him. Amara paced around the room, her mind racing. We're not safe here anymore. Where can we go? I don't know, but we can't stay here. And we can't wait 24 hours to see what Richard does next. Amara began gathering their research materials. We need to get this information to Detective Martinez and find somewhere safe to wait while she builds a case against him. As they prepared to leave the penthouse that had become their sanctuary, Jonathan realized that their investigation had taken a dangerous turn. Richard was no longer hiding his involvement in the original accident, which meant he was prepared to take desperate action to protect himself. But Jonathan also realized something else. His love for Amara had given him a strength and determination he'd never possessed before. Richard might have destroyed his legs 2 years ago, but he wouldn't destroy the life Jonathan was building with the woman he loved. Amara, he said as they gathered their belongings, whatever happens next, I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save my life, you gave me a reason to live. You gave me the same thing, she replied, stopping her packing to kiss him tenderly. And we're going to get through this together. Richard thinks he can intimidate us into giving up, but he doesn't understand what he's dealing with. What's he dealing with? Amara smiled, and Jonathan saw the fierce determination that had attracted him from the first day they met. Two people who love each other enough to fight for their future, no matter what it costs. As they left the penthouse together, Jonathan felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The next few days would determine whether they could expose Richard's crimes and build the life they both wanted, or whether Richard's desperation would destroy everything they'd found together. But for the first time since his accident, Jonathan wasn't facing his challenges alone. He had Amara by his side, and together they were stronger than any threat Richard could pose. Detective Martinez met them at a safe house she'd arranged through the police department, a modest apartment in a nondescript building across town. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of activity as she worked to build a case against Richard based on his direct threats and the evidence Amara had gathered. We have enough to bring him in for questioning, she explained as they settled into the apartment's small living room. The threat he made yesterday, combined with the financial evidence and Mrs. Chen's testimony, gives us grounds for arrest. What about the men he brought with him? Amara asked. They were obviously there to intimidate us, and one of them was carrying a weapon. We're working on identifying them through security footage from your building. If they have criminal records, which they probably do, that will strengthen our case. Jonathan sat in his wheelchair by the window, watching the street below for any sign of Richard or his associates. How long do you think it will take to build a solid case against him? With what we have now, we could arrest him today. But I want to make sure we have enough evidence to make the charges stick. Detective Martinez spread out copies of financial documents on the coffee table. I've been working with the district attorney's office, and they think we have a strong case for attempted murder, conspiracy, and extortion. Amara was organizing her medical files, documenting Jonathan's recovery progress. What about the surveillance Richard mentioned? If he's been watching us, there might be evidence of stalking as well. Already on it. We found cameras positioned across from your building and tracking devices on both your vehicles. Detective Martinez's expression was grim. This man has been planning something for a while. Before anyone could respond, Jonathan's phone rang. The caller ID showed Richard's number. Should I answer it? Jonathan asked. Yes, but put it on speaker, Detective Martinez said, pulling out recording equipment. Let's see what he has to say. Jonathan answered the call. Hello, Richard. Jonathan, I hope you've had time to consider my offer. Richard's voice sounded strained, less confident than it had during his visit. Have you made a decision about the contract? I have, Jonathan said calmly. My answer is no. I'm not selling you my shares and I'm not disappearing quietly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. That's unfortunate, Jonathan. Very unfortunate. Richard, I know what you did 2 years ago. I know you caused my accident and I know why. The gambling debts, the insurance policies, all of it. You can't prove any of that, Richard replied, but his voice betrayed his panic. Actually, we can. The police have reopened the investigation. They have witness testimony, financial records, and now your direct threats from yesterday. Jonathan looked at Detective Martinez, who nodded encouragingly. It's over, Richard. No, it's not over, Richard said, his voice becoming desperate. You think you're so smart with your little nurse and your miracle recovery. But I've spent 2 years planning for every contingency. What does that mean? It means that if I go down, I'm taking you with me. Both of you. The line went dead. Detective Martinez immediately got on her radio, calling for backup and requesting Richard's immediate arrest. He's planning something, Amara said, moving closer to Jonathan. That sounded like a man who's completely desperate. All units, we have a possible threat to witnesses in protective custody, Detective Martinez spoke rapidly into her radio. Need immediate backup at the safe house location. As if on cue, the sound of squealing tires came from the street below. Jonathan looked out the window to see a dark SUV pulling up in front of their building. They found us, he said grimly. Detective Martinez drew her weapon and moved to the window. 2 men getting out of the vehicle. One of them matches the description of Richard's associate from yesterday. What do we do? Amara asked, helping Jonathan move away from the window. We wait for backup and we don't let them in, Detective Martinez said. This building is secure, but we need to. Her words were cut off by the sound of the building's fire alarm. Smoke began seeping under the apartment door. They're trying to force us out, Jonathan realized. If the building's on fire, we'll have to evacuate. Detective Martinez checked the hallway through the peephole. Smoke, but I don't see flames. They might have just triggered the alarm system to create chaos. The sound of sirens grew louder as police backup and fire department units approached. But the smoke was getting thicker, and they could hear other residents evacuating the building. We can't stay here, Amara said, covering her mouth and nose with her shirt. Even if it's a fake alarm, the smoke is real. Detective Martinez made a quick decision. We're going to escort you out through the back exit. Stay close, keep low, and don't separate for any reason. They made their way through the smoke-filled hallway, Jonathan's wheelchair moving as quickly as possible with Amara and Detective Martinez flanking him. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as they navigated toward the rear stairwell. This way, Detective Martinez directed, opening the stairwell door. That's when they heard footsteps on the stairs above them, moving down in their direction. Someone's coming, Amara whispered. Detective Martinez positioned herself between the approaching footsteps and Jonathan's wheelchair. Police, she called out. Identify yourself. The response was a gunshot that ricocheted off the concrete wall inches from where they stood. Move, Detective Martinez shouted, pushing Jonathan's wheelchair back through the door into the hallway. They retreated into the nearest apartment, which had been left unlocked by evacuating residents. Detective Martinez barricaded the door while Amara helped Jonathan transfer from his wheelchair to a position behind the heavy kitchen counter. How many of them are there? Jonathan asked. At least 2, maybe more, Detective Martinez replied, checking her ammunition. But backup should be here any minute. As if responding to her words, they heard the sounds of multiple police vehicles arriving outside, followed by shouted commands and running footsteps in the building. Police, drop your weapons, came a voice from the hallway outside their apartment. More gunshots followed, along with shouts and the sound of people running. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Detective Martinez's radio crackled to life. All clear, Detective Martinez. 2 suspects in custody. It's safe to come out. When they emerged from the apartment, they found the hallway filled with police officers and firefighters. The smoke was clearing, revealing that there had been no actual fire, just smoke devices designed to create panic and confusion. Richard? Jonathan asked as they made their way outside. In custody, one of the officers reported. We arrested him at his office an hour ago. The two men here were carrying out his final instructions, but they're not talking yet. As they stood on the sidewalk watching the emergency vehicles, Jonathan felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. After 2 years of wondering about the truth, Richard's crimes were finally exposed. Is it really over? Amara asked, taking his hand. The criminal case is just beginning, Detective Martinez said. But the immediate threat to both of you is over. Richard won't be getting bail on attempted murder charges. Jonathan squeezed Amara's hand, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past few weeks. Amara, I need to ask you something. What? When I proposed yesterday before all this chaos started, you said yes. Do you still mean it? Amara smiled, and despite the smoke stains on her face and the stress of the day, Jonathan thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Jonathan Pierce, I would marry you in the middle of a police station if that's what it took. Yes, I still mean it. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. As police officers took their statements and investigators processed the scene, Jonathan realized that his long nightmare was finally ending. Richard would face justice for his crimes, the truth about the accident would come out, and most importantly, he had found the love of his life in the process. The investigation had revealed the worst of human nature in Richard's greed and desperation, but it had also revealed the best in Amara's courage and dedication. Together, they had not only survived Richard's attempts to destroy them, but they had also found a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. 6 months later, Jonathan stood at the altar of a small church, supporting himself on specially designed crutches while waiting for his bride. The months since Richard's arrest had been filled with physical therapy, legal proceedings, and wedding planning, but most importantly, they had been filled with love. His recovery had progressed beyond everyone's expectations, including his own. While he wasn't yet walking independently, he could stand for extended periods and take several steps with assistance. Dr. Williams, who had initially been skeptical of Amara's unconventional treatment methods, now regularly consulted with her on other patients with spinal cord injuries. You look nervous, his best man, Detective Martinez's partner Detective Rodriguez, whispered with a grin. I'm not nervous about marrying Amara, Jonathan replied, adjusting his tie. I'm nervous about not falling down before she gets here. The organ music began and every head in the small church turned toward the back doors. When they opened to reveal Amara in a simple but elegant white dress, Jonathan felt his breath catch in his throat. She was radiant, practically glowing with happiness as she walked down the aisle. Her brother Marcus, the pediatric oncologist she told him about months ago, escorted her down the aisle with obvious pride. The small congregation included Detective Martinez, Mrs. Chin, several of Jonathan's employees who had supported him during the investigation, and Amara's family from Georgia. You look incredible, Jonathan whispered as Amara joined him at the altar. You're standing, she whispered back, tears in her eyes. On our wedding day you're standing. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, promising to support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When Jonathan spoke about how Amara had saved him in every way a person could be saved, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. I, Amara, take you, Jonathan, to be my husband, my partner, and my best friend. I promise to challenge you when you need challenging, support you when you need support, and love you unconditionally for the rest of our lives. I, Jonathan, take you, Amara, to be my wife, my partner, and the love of my life. I promise to never give up on our dreams, to trust in your wisdom and strength, and to spend every day showing you how grateful I am that you walked into my life when I needed you most. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jonathan managed to take 2 steps toward Amara without his crutches before she met him in the middle for their first kiss as a married couple. The reception was held at Pierce Industries corporate headquarters, in the same conference room where Jonathan had successfully defended his position as CEO 6 months earlier. Richard's conviction for attempted murder, conspiracy, and extortion had made national news, and Jonathan had used the publicity to advocate for better support and research for spinal cord injury patients. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan said during his reception speech, standing with one hand on Amara's shoulder for support. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I was surviving on liquid nutrition, convinced I would never walk again, and ready to give up everything I had worked for. He looked down at Amara, who was glowing with pride. Then this incredible woman walked into my life and refused to let me give up. She saved my life, solved a crime, and somehow found time to fall in love with me in the process. The guests laughed and applauded as Jonathan continued. Amara didn't just help me recover physically. She helped me remember that life is worth fighting for, that love is possible even in the darkest times, and that the future is always brighter than we imagine. He paused, overcome with emotion. Today I can stand on my own 2 feet for the first time in over 2 years. But more importantly, today I married my best friend, my partner, and the woman who taught me that healing begins with hope. As the evening wound down, Jonathan and Amara found themselves alone on the building's rooftop garden, looking out over the city lights. "Mrs. Pierce," Jonathan said, testing out her new name, "how does it feel to be married to a CEO who can almost walk?" "It feels perfect," Amara replied, settling into his lap as he sat in his wheelchair. "Though I have to admit, I fell in love with you when you were completely wheelchair-bound, so the walking thing is just a bonus." "What do you think our future holds?" Jonathan asked, wrapping his arms around her. "I think we're going to continue your recovery until you're walking independently. I think we're going to expand your company's charitable foundation to fund spinal cord research. I think we're going to have a couple of beautiful children who inherit your determination and my stubbornness." Amara smiled. "And I think we're going to be ridiculously happy together for the next 50 years. "Only 50 years? Well, after that we'll have to see how we feel." As they sat together under the stars, Jonathan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Richard's betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but it had also led him to Amara. His accident had taken away his ability to walk, but it had given him something more valuable, the knowledge that he could overcome anything with the right person by his side. 3 months later, Amara's prediction about their future began coming true when she discovered she was pregnant with their first child. Jonathan's recovery continued progressing, and by the time their daughter was born, he was walking with only a cane for support. They named her Hope, because she represented everything good that had come from the darkest period of their lives. As Jonathan held his newborn daughter for the first time, standing beside Amara's hospital bed without any assistance, he realized that his definition of success had completely changed. Success wasn't about building the biggest company or making the most money. Success was about this: holding his wife's hand while she slept peacefully after giving birth to their child, knowing that they had built a life together based on love, trust, and the unwavering belief that anything was possible. Richard was serving a 15-year prison sentence, his gambling debts and desperate choices having cost him everything. But for Jonathan and Amara, the end of that nightmare had been just the beginning of their love story. As he looked down at baby Hope sleeping in his arms, Jonathan whispered a promise that he intended to keep for the rest of his life. "Your mommy and daddy are going to make sure you grow up knowing that love can overcome anything, that family is everything, and that there's always hope for a better tomorrow." Outside the hospital window, the sun was rising on their new life together, a life that had begun with a medical emergency and a desperate job application, but had become something beautiful beyond either of their wildest dreams.